Well, good morning, everybody. It's a couple minutes before 12, but I'm glad you're here this morning. We've got some folks who are traveling, some folks who are still recovering, some folks who are back from traveling, some folks who are recovering from surgery, some surgical procedures they've had done. Noelle is out today still checking on some folks who are kind of all over the place. Yesterday we had a wonderful gathering to honor Jack McIntosh. We ran out of bulletins about 30 minutes before the service started. We printed 200 bulletins. There are probably 300 people there, at least. I don't know what time the deacons got done with the... yeah, I figured it was probably a couple hours after the service was over. I had to look. I was like, oh, it's time for me to get my kids. So, but it was a great day.
Was his service recorded?
It should be. It was recorded, so it should be in our live feed on YouTube. Excuse me.
I must say, Michael did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
You felt good after the funeral.
Yeah.
I heard that from a couple of people.
Yeah. It's always, I was talking to David Bailey about this. People come up to me and is like, you do a really good funeral. I was like, how bad are the funerals you've been to?
Bad.
Yeah, that you got to have a good one, and so it's one of those things. But some of you know, and I shared with David. But what? Yeah. Well, what I said is, I was thinking about it, is if Pat Conroy and John Grisham wrote a novel together, Jack McIntosh would be the leading man, So it was pretty good. I was pretty proud of that phrase. Pat Conroy is one of my all-time favorite authors.
I said yesterday several times, live your life so that when you pass, the church is full.
Yeah.
And that, people loved you that much.
Yeah.
And want to be there to say goodbye.
That means I got to die before too many people get to really know me. So, okay. We are on Revelation 12 and 13. We are on Revelation 12 and 13. I think they kind of go together, so I'd like to keep them together, if at all possible. We've had some really good discussion thus far. I'm not going to delineate from this point forward between dispensationalism and covenant theology. We all know kind of where my background is and why we are who we are. So all I'm going to say in that is if there are some kind of disparate, not desperate, right? Disparate understandings of Revelation, it's okay. It's okay, right? We are not meant to have the same understanding of the same text all at the same time. And it's going to be different next time you read Revelation. So that's what we're going to get into. One of the things I found this week in preparation for this is, you've heard me quote Eugene Peterson several times. Eugene Peterson was a Presbyterian pastor and author. And he said, Revelation does not introduce evil, it unmasks it. Revelation doesn't introduce evil, it unmasks it. So we're going to look at some of the unmasking of evil today. Chapter 12 and 13 form kind of the heart of Revelation's vision. It's where we get the number, I'm going to write it up here just because it's going to make y'all mad. It's where we get the number 666. See, all of you, whoo! And we'll talk about that a little bit more. After the heavenly triumph in chapter 11 that we looked at last week, the focus shifts to this cosmic conflict between God and evil. Evil is no longer abstract, it is personified. it is organized, and it mimics divine power. Evil mimics divine power. Yet, who wins? God. God wins, right? So we have this great, I know you love them, don't you? You love these boots, don't you? These are my alligator boots from Brazil. So I don't think I've worn them in here yet. So because he always looks at my shoes. It's funny. Because he's jealous because he only has one shoe. So we're really going to kind of dive into this a little bit today. So chapter 11 ended with the opening of the heavenly temple and the ark. We talked about that a little bit. God's presence and justice. Now that's really important. God's presence and justice, right? Chapters 12 and 13 unveil what's happening behind the scenes. It's this cosmic battle. Every time I think about this cosmic battle, I can't help but to look at, and I'm not a big I'm not big on Lord of the Rings. I've tried several times to get into Lord of the Rings, both the books and the movies, and I just couldn't get there, right? Nobody ever read the Chronicles of Narnia to me growing up, but when the first movie came out, I went back and read some of the Chronicles of Narnia. The movies are really good, but talking about cosmic battle, right? So the cosmic battle in the first Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that's what I envision going on here in Revelation 12 and 13. There's another really big cosmic battle that goes on in another movie that you could find on Disney Plus, and that's in the Marvel movies, right? So I don't know if you've ever watched the Marvel movies. I think during COVID, I watched them all in chronological order. It was a lot of fun, and now it's been 5 years since they've made 25 more movies since then, and so I've lost track. But there's this cosmic battle of good versus evil in all these Marvel movies. All of the heroes are based on the Christ figure. I mean, there's no doubt about that. All the heroes are based on the Christ figure. Superman being the biggest, and of course that's not Marvel, that's DC Comics. I never got into comics, but I like the movies. These heroes are based on these Christ figures, and it's always good versus evil, right? And at the same time, there's something very unique for us who worship the Lamb, right? There's something very different because all these heroes, all these myths of these heroes, whether it's new myths of DC or Marvel comic characters, or old myths of Norse gods and Roman gods, they don't have the humility that Christ has, right? So that's the difference, is that you don't fight power with power, you fight power with humility and love, right? And that's what we see in Revelation. So we're going to get into that a little bit. Before we get into chapter 12 and 13, any questions so far on 12 and 13?
Is there any meaning or significance that all of these characters have horns?
Yes. Is there a meaning or significance that all the characters have horns? Yes.
What?
We're going to get into it. Some of it we know what it means. Some of it we have an idea of what it means.
Does it have anything to do with the passage in the Old Testament where Moses had horns?
It may, absolutely. Yeah, so all these visions, right? So Revelation, it harkens back so much to Ezekiel, to Zechariah, to Daniel. It's not new imagery. The other thing that's not new that I think is really important, and the Westminster Bible does a really good job of pointing this out, is the other thing, and how many of you study Greek mythology, right? How many of you have read the Odyssey and the Iliad, right? So the same thing that you're seeing that John of Patmos is unveiling, it would have been similar, it would ring true about the Greek mythology, right? So the same people that Jason is fighting is the one who's showing up to fight here. Now, Jason doesn't get to win the way that God wins, right? So John of Patmos is showing how God wins in a way that no other little g God can win. And so that's really a big, important. Because remember, so there's a really pretty brand new translation of the Odyssey and the Iliad, and it's by Emily Wilson. She's a professor at one of the Ivy Leagues up north, and she has gone and she's done a fresh translation of both of those texts. And what she found is both of those, Iliads first. The Iliad was written about the same time that the Old Testament was codified. Right? So the Iliad was written down. Now it was an oral tradition, but it was written down about the same time that the Old Testament was codified. So you've got this Greek mythology over here. You've got the story of the people of God over here. And then John of Patmos is kind of saying, look, you're hearing this, you're sensing this is really who God is. Right? That's what's going on. So that's why you have this like really big language about dragons and beasts and such and such. Okay?
And over here, you got the Persians with their Zoroastrianism, which is everything is good and evil all the time. Light is good,
Yep.
dark is bad.
Yep. Yeah, and that's so the Zoroastrian kind of theology over here is just good or evil. And so that's why God is different. God is not just good versus evil. God is God, and we are not, right? And so it's just how do we navigate all that? And so I think in a couple weeks I'm preaching on Elijah and Jezebel, right? And who Elijah's God is very different from Jezebel's understanding of God. Elisha's understanding of God is very different from the false prophets in their time. So you're always kind of complaining about this. Okay, so let's start with the woman. The woman. Chapter 12. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs, in the agony of giving birth. Then another, okay, let's just stop right there. Stop with the woman. Who is the woman? Israel. Yeah, the woman is Israel. Right? Because what's on her head? A crown with 12 stars. So the woman is Israel. Okay? And she's pregnant. Right? So what does pregnancy mean? New life, expectation, right? Pickles and ice cream, I don't know. I think one of my kids is Snickers and hot dogs. I can't remember which one. The other one of my kids is saltines in A1 sauce. Saltines and A1 sauce is what one of my kids is. Yeah, so which one? That must be Vera because she's salty. So the woman is Israel, right? She is pregnant with expectation. You see the sun. So if you've ever seen pictures of Mary, I don't know if we have any white Marys around here. If you've ever seen a picture of Mary, there's usually this like sun halo around her, right? That's kind of where this comes from. A woman clothed with the sun and with a moon under her feet, and on her head is a crown of 12 stars, the 12 tribes of Israel. And she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs. Who is the woman Israel giving birth to? Jesus, right? This is going to be important in just a little bit. So that's why you might also say it's Mary, right? Now, what happens when Israel gives birth to Jesus? Biblically, historically.
It sends Israel into turmoil, different groups
Yeah. So here are these 12 tribes that's giving birth to the Messiah. So what John is doing here is saying that the Messiah is coming from the Israelites. The Messiah is coming from the Israelites, and the Messiah, the anointed one, is going to call the Israelites to turn towards God. And the Israelites are going to say, I don't want to. Right? I don't want to do that. That's too hard. I'm actually pretty happy. Remember even some of the folks in the Babylonian captivity, they did not want to go back to Jerusalem. Why did they not want to go back to Jerusalem? Because they were fat and happy. Things were going fine. They can worship God from afar. They don't really need this, right? Okay, so you got Israel, pregnant, Jesus the Messiah. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon. Okay, so we got this dragon over here, a great red dragon. All right. With 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his head. So diadems is just a crown. Okay, so 7 heads with 10 horns. Does each head have 10 horns? Or does like some heads have 2 and most heads have 1? I don't know. 7 heads with 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to deliver a child, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a scepter or rod of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that there she can be nourished for 1,260 days. Have we heard that before? We heard 1,260 days in chapter 11. 1,260 days is essentially 3.5 years. All right? So this quotation of 1,260 days means it's going to end. Right? This wilderness wandering, it's like 42 months, I think. It says somewhere else 42 months. This wilderness wandering is going to end. 3.5 years. Right? So half of completion. Right? So if we think, numbers are really, really important, right? So 3.5 years is like 7 years is perfect. 7 years, you let your land rest. 7 times 7, you have a year of Jubilee, right? So it's all this stuff is important. So we've got this, that's not what I'm doing. Hold on. Where am I? There we go. So you have this woman. She's a radiant figure clothed with the sun, the moon, the 12 stars. She represents the covenant people of God, Israel, fulfilled in the church, right, who bear the Messiah. The dragon, the great red dragon, or that ancient serpent, when we think of it, we think automatically of Satan, right? That's kind of what you think of. He has 7 heads, 10 horns, symbolize the fullness of worldly power and empire. Okay, he seeks to devour the child, reflecting Pharaoh and Herod. Right? Seeks to devour the child. Who tries to kill Jesus? Herod, right? Who kills all the firstborn in Egypt? Pharaoh, right? So what this red dragon does is it kind of symbolizes those in the past who've tried to take for themselves this idea of the Messiah, this idea of the anointed one, right? That's what this red dragon is. And so when we say it's just Satan, we forget that it's also empire. Does that make sense? The other idea that this might have 7 heads is because if you, and this is one of those Marvel movies, so if you've got a body with 7 heads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you cut one off, guess what? It still goes, right? And you cut one off, it still goes. So you may cut off Pharaoh, but then you got Herod. And you may cut off Herod, or you make Nebuchadnezzar. And you may have Nebuchadnezzar, and then you've got the Roman Empire. And you've got, so the dragon and the beast, which we're going to get into, is not necessarily this mystical beast. It is power and empire. Right? Because who is controlling this early Christian movement? Or who's quashing the early Christian movement? First it's the Jews, and then it's Rome. Right? And the Jews are trying to quash it so that Rome won't quash them. That's why the Jews are trying, that's why Saul goes out and tries to persecute the early Christians, because the Jews want to keep the Christians, this sect, right, of Judaism, they want to keep this sect of Judaism under control so that Rome doesn't think the Jews think they're better than emperor, than Caesar. Because what do they call Jesus? King of the Jews. They don't call him King of the Christians. And so because they call him King of the Jews, because of this Old Testament text here, they're like, shh, not yet, not now, it's not time. Don't call him King of the Jews, because then Caesar's going to get mad at us and going to kill us. So we're going to kill you so he doesn't kill us. Right? And so then there are all these heads that just get chopped off and another head continues on. Questions about the dragon? The dragon's rage represents evil's desperation. The dragon's rage represents evil's desperation. It has been defeated, one head after another, but not fully destroyed. It's been mortally wounded. Enemy is still dangerous. Questions? Then we have this pursuit, right? The woman flees, so the child doesn't, but the woman flees into the wilderness. What does that wilderness remind you of? 40 years.
The closest thing to that, the picture is Hagar.
Yeah, so Hagar, even before Egypt, right? So you got Hagar in the wilderness. And so when Hagar is in the wilderness, God sees her, and guess what Hagar sees? Hagar sees the face of God and doesn't die. Does Moses ever see the face of God? No. Hagar, I think, I could be wrong about this. Once I thought I was wrong, but I was really right. Hagar, I think, is the only person in the Bible to see the face of God and live. There may be. I have to go back. I mean, you can go look. Moses doesn't see the face of God. Like, he has to turn his back, right? So Hagar's in the wilderness. You know, she bears a child. Now, this child is Ishmael, right? Which Sarah, much like the Jews later on in the first century, wants Ishmael cast out. The Jews want the Christians cast out. But Ishmael, God says, I'm going to take care of this child. And we believe, we know, that Ishmael becomes the father of the Islam, essentially. Not necessarily the religion, but the people. The religion is much later, obviously. But Abraham then is the grandfather of Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And so instead of fighting with each other, we have to learn to get along with each other. Because if we say Father Abraham had many sons and daughters, many sons have Father Abraham, then we've got to share that family table. So you also have Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, the prodigal older brother and the prodigal younger brother, right? Jews and Christians, right? All these fights that go on from generation to generation to generation. So Hagar, you've got the wilderness when the Israelites go into the wilderness from Egypt. You got that where God provided God's protection over and over and over again for 40 years. You've got Jesus' own passing through the wilderness for 40 days, right? Where again, the angels wait on him. Now, it's interesting. If you look at the different gospel accounts of Jesus in the wilderness, one of them, I think it may be Mark's, says Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Could also be translated led by the Spirit through the wilderness. Right? That the Spirit never leaves Jesus. When we think of Jesus, we think of the Spirit taking, sometimes in other gospel accounts, we think Jesus, the Spirit's going, all right, Jesus, here you go. You know, but in this Mark's gospel, it is the Spirit with Jesus the whole time. Again, providing. So that when Jesus then is tempted at the end of those 40 days by the devil, Satan, whatever you want to call it, he has the strength to say, no, I'm good. I'm good. And that's what happens here too. And the woman fled into the wilderness, and there she has a place prepared by God so that she can be nourished for 1,260 days, also known as 42 months. So you got 40 years, 40 days, 42 months, but it means that time is going to end. Okay, this is my favorite part. I show up again. And war broke out in heaven, and the messenger of God, which is what Michael means, the messenger of God and his angels fought against the dragon. Dragon back. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan. Hasatan means adversary. The deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. This is the dragon, not Michael. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven proclaiming, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah, Jesus. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down. The adversary of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down. He accuses them day and night before our God. But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, Jesus, and by the word of their testimony, their faithfulness. For they did not cling to life even in the face of death. Martyrs, right? Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, and with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. Questions? Comments? So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had delivered the male child. So the dragon's on the earth, he's pursuing the woman. But who's protecting the woman? Who's protecting the woman? God. This is a good biblical answer here. Okay. But the woman was given 2 wings of the great eagle, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. Right? What do you think that means? For time and times and half a time. There's an end to it. Yeah. Let's see what the word here is. Well, so we know it's 3.5 years here, but I wonder what word there. Oh, it's kairos. It's not chronos, right? So it's time is kairos, and times is kairos, and half a time is kairos. So it's just kairos, kairos, kairos. And what is kairos? God's time. Kairos is God's time, right? Which means if it's God's time, then whatever will be, will be. And also, what happens in that time happens because of who God is, right? We want to live on chronology. We want to live on chronos, but we're called to live in kairos. Time and times and half a time. Anybody else? Okay. Then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to help the woman. So even all of God's creation then is working to help the woman. And who is the woman? Right? But the earth came to help the woman. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from its mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to wage war on the rest of her children. Right? The dragon was after the Messiah. And the woman was saved, and so the dragon went to wage war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Right? So the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus. So these are Christians. Right? So now the dragon has come for the rest of us. Is what it's saying. Now, again, could this be some future time? Yes. Could this also be something that's already happened by the time of John of Patmos? Yes. Because the Christians are being persecuted. If this is written anywhere between 90 and 120, we don't really know. The Christians have been persecuted by the time John of Patmos is writing this. And remember, John of Patmos' first and foremost role is that of pastor. And is to preach words of encouragement to his congregation. And so if you were being persecuted, not like just somebody stepping on your feelings, but truly being persecuted, right? My role as pastor will be very different from what it is right now. My role of pastor now is encourager to live as God has called you to live. Right? If you are under threat of true persecution, then my role is to be like, all right, hold fast. Right? And John says that. He says, hold fast. Hold fast. This has happened before. It's happening now. It will continue to happen, but God is still going to win. And that's what he's saying here. Questions? All right. Let's see if I have my notes here about the dragon. The woman flees in the wilderness. It's a place of both trial and divine care. The earth helps her, symbolizing creation's participation in God's preservation of the faithful, even when threatened. God's people are sustained by grace. You ready for the beast? Bring on the beast. All right. Jacob didn't. So Jacob wrestled with God, but it was at night. But it was nighttime, right? So there's no. I mean, he wrestled with God, and he saw him. He's striven with God, and that's why he changed his name from Jacob to Israel. You have striven with God and win and prevailed, not won. But yeah, I'll have to look. I'll look at that and see. Okay.
Can I back up for a second?
Back up.
So, the whole idea of the dragon being thrown down from heaven, so the dragon wasn't the deceiver.
Yeah, the great dragon was thrown down. Well, yes. Mm-hmm.
So, how's that work?
Well, I mean that's an ancient Jewish tradition, right, about Lucifer, right, about the angel of the angel Lucifer being thrown down.
So Lucifer and Satan are not the same.
We don't know. Lucifer really is a Hebrew word that we've personified as Satan. So Lucifer is just a Hebrew word that means like angel of light. In Isaiah, I can't remember exactly where in Isaiah. In the King James Version, it gets personified as a capital L, Lucifer, when really it's just a lowercase L, Lucifer, which just means light bearer or something like that from the Hebrew word. So that's a great question. How does it work? So then the question then becomes, not only how does it work, did God create Satan? Right? That's the question. But what does Job tell us? Job tells us, and I think Revelation kind of lives into that, is that there is this kind of divine counsel, right? Now, Job is, we believe, the earliest book ever written in the Old Testament. Job's writing predates everything else in the Old Testament. So Job doesn't have the most nuanced understanding of God, right? So Job does tell us, though, that there's kind of this divine counsel and God saying, oh, look at my guy Job. Job's my guy. And the accuser says, well, hurt him and he won't be your guy anymore. And God says, no, that's not the case. And the accuser, who's essentially like a lawyer, like a prosecuting attorney, says, well, hurt him and see what happens. Hurt him and see what happens. So, Job loses everything. And Job hangs on, and then finally cries out, why me, God? And God says, boy, please. Where were you when I formed the foundations of the world? So what does this divine counsel look like? Could it be the accuser? Right? So again, that's why you want to separate the accuser from this red-horned Satan character, right? Because then we can all be that accuser. And it's also, I don't know really how to say it. Here's what I would say. When we personify the accuser as the red-horned devil, then we let ourselves off the hook, right? Then the evil we do is because the devil made me do it versus I really wanted to do it, right? I really wanted to do it. So the other thing that we have in Genesis chapter 1, let us create humankind in our image, in the image of God, He created them, male and female. The us could also be this kind of divine counsel, right? So we don't know exactly what this divine counsel looks like. This is pretty primitive theology, right? But again, John of Patmos is saying that this evil that's coming down from heaven, it is what he's doing is he's given it power, right? If it comes from heaven, it is powerful. Right? And it's not going to be overcome. You can't just will yourself out of that evil. And that's what Paul says in Romans. I cannot do the very thing that I don't want to do. Right? The very thing I want to do, I can't do. So I do the thing I don't want to do. Right? That's where we talk about free will and whether or not we have free will. It's limited.
So, one of the most embarrassing things to the Spirit for centuries has been the quarrels between believers, the accusations between believers. And what I see here in chapter 12 is that
Yeah.
is finally dealt with. That is finally heard of, and it costs.
Yes.
But can you imagine actually a universal Little C Catholic Church and what that would mean?
Well, and that's a great question. So this idea that the accuser or the adversary, we are the adversary, right? In that sense.
Many times, many years over.
Yeah. And so what this is saying is stop it. And I really think, and we talked about this a little bit last week. The Great Divorce. Have you read, or not the Great Divorce? Well, The Great Divorce is good by C.S. Lewis, but Screwtape Letters. Screwtape Letters, where like the devil is trying to tell his nephew how to be a really good devil. You know, it's a really fun book. You should read it. But there is this like, but again, I think when we personify evil as so totally other, we forget that we're not who God created us to be. But so I think that heavenly down is power. Is what I think is going on there. Okay, let's look at the beast. And then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. So the dragon is just kind of like waiting. My high school mascot, we were the Jefferson Dragons, and it was a bright red, red and blue dragon. I've not seen a whole lot of dragons other mascots, but it's a great mascot. UAB is the dragon. That's right. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads. Now wait a minute, haven't we already seen this? The dragon had the same thing. And on its horns were the 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. Blasphemous names, basically names that are meant to be holy but are not holy, or said as if they're holy but are not holy. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, its mouth was like a lion's mouth, and the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. Okay? So now you've got the dragon that's cast down, and you've got this beast coming up, and the beast authority comes from this dragon, this accuser, right? The great serpent. One of its heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its fatal wound had been healed. So just the same way the dragon had all these heads, and one had received a death blow, but it had been healed, right? And it was still going. It's a many-headed hydra, right? In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who can fight against it? So the best way to think about it is the dragon is power, and the beast is specific empire. Right? Is a specific empire. And in John, it's the Roman Empire. Right? So one of the heads that had a fatal wound, was it Nero? Right? So Nero had a fatal wound, right? But empire lived on. The beast lived on. The beast was given a mouth speaking arrogant and blasphemous words. So when the Caesar says, who does the Caesar say I am? Caesar says they are God, right? Or the Son of God, or the light of God, right? So for a Caesar to say that they're God, that's blasphemous. But why was Jesus crucified? For blasphemy and sedition, right? And it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. The same time the woman's in the wilderness, the beast is allowed to exercise authority. Where am I? 6, yeah. It opened its mouth to speak blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to wage war on the saints, which is mentioned up here in chapter 12, and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. We've heard this before in Revelation. Whose tribe, people, and language and nation are they? They're God's, right? So they think this empire, this Roman Empire, this powers and principalities think they have authority. And all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it. everyone whose name was not written from the foundation of the world in the book of life and the Lamb that was slaughtered. Let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive, again, this pastoral note here, if you are to be taken captive, into captivity you go. If you kill with a sword you must be killed. Here is a call for the endurance, which is what we call patience, and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in sight of all. And by the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives, there's the accuser, right? And the great serpent. It deceives, it deceives the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so the image of the beast could have speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave. Boy, that sounds like some Paul language right there, doesn't it? To be given a brand on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the brand, that is, the name of the beast or the number for its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understand calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number for a person. It's really, really important. The number of the beast is a number for a person. Revelation says it right there. It is the number for a person, and its number is 616. Both. It's both. So some manuscripts have 666, and some manuscripts have 616. Okay? And what this means is there, and I forget the name of this thing for numerology. This idea that symbol of so number 666 is either the symbol of imperfection 3 times, or it's the number of the emperor at the time. So gematria, that's right, gematria. And so this study, this gematria, is to study that every person's name adds up to a number. Right? So, now I'm going to write this. I did not come up with this. I think it's in the Westminster Bible. What is, oh gosh, where was it? Who has the Westminster Bible open?
Oh, it's on page 2133, there's a section on reading through time.
Yeah, give me the president's name in the 1980s. What's his full name?
Oh, Ronald Reagan.
What's his middle name?
Wilson.
Wilson Reagan.
I don't know if it's A-N or E-N. 666. So there are people in the 80s, I didn't know this, I was still pretty new at that time. There were people in the 80s who associated Ronald Wilson Reagan with a beast. Right? Because all of his, I never heard it until I read it in that article. Yeah. There are other numbers, right, that are not necessarily 666, that might be associated with empire or evil, right? We number our presidents, right? We number our presidents. So for some people, number 44 might be the sign of the beast. For some people, number 45 might be the sign of the beast. I said for some people. I said 44 first, so it's on video. So we number that, right? And so what Revelation is saying now, how many of you grew up and you're like, you can't take change that's $6.66? Yeah. You can't be in the room on the 6th floor, on the 6th hallway, on the 6th room on the right. Right?
When I worked for the telephone company, you could not have an NPA, which is the first 3 digits of 666.
Yeah.
Signed anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was the sign of the beast.
Not be there.
If they took the rest of the Bible that literally, we would be better off.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they took what Jesus said literally, we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But literally, Revelation says that 666 is a number of a person.
But wasn't Revelation written by a person?
Yeah. And so he's hiding, but this is Caesar. This number, and I can't remember which emperor it is at the time. Which emperor is it? It says in that same thing. Nero, right? Yeah, so he is literally the beast in Revelation is literally the Emperor Nero.
That's because he's persecuting Christians.
Because he's persecuting Christians. Can the beast also be somewhere in the future? Is it going to be a wild beast with horns? Or is it going to be power and empire?
Just looking more generally beyond the literal here, when one beast is defeated, a new beast arises, it's just one after the other.
Yes. Yes. Well, and so that's exactly what happens. And just look over the history of the last 2,000 years. Right? I'm watching a series on Netflix right now. I go back and forth between like reading all the time and just watching these series. I'm watching a series on Netflix right now. It's called The Last Kingdom. Anybody seen it? And it's about it's really pretty well done. It's adult. Don't let your kids watch it. But it is set in the 800s of what will become England before it becomes England. Right? And it's the Danes and the Saxons and the Britons, right? Who are all then the Welsh are going to come in and fight a little bit before there's one united England, if there is ever a united England, because what are you going to do with those Scots up there, and the Picts and the Celts and all, and so, but there's this constant flowing. I'm in season 2. There's this constant flowing of just fighting and no king. Now the interesting thing in this piece is the Saxons are Christian and the Danes are heathens, right? And so the Saxons believe God is on their side, yet they're exercising power, aka killing whoever they want to kill in the name of God, right? So that actually Alfred, the king of the Saxons, in Winchester, in Wessex, is actually acting like the beast. But he's saying it's the heathens that are the beast. And Uhtred of Bebbanburg is really, he's the guy. He's the Michael. He's killing all the beast. But he's not really that great either. So, but yeah, history has shown us over, and I don't know how accurate this is in terms of history, but it's really a good show. But history has told us over and over and over again, when one Ottoman Empire pops up over here, right? Then we bop it on the head over here, and then somebody over here rises up, and Mussolini over here, and the Russian czars over here, and da-da-da-da-da, and there's always this, this China over here, and Japan, what they did to South Korea, and China, what they did to Japan, and all that, and So are we just complicit in the activity of the beast? Right? Because what's happening is the beast says, oh, I have the authority from heaven. Right? Because where did the dragon come from? So the beast says, I have the authority of heaven, but the authority comes from the dragon, not from the lamb. And that's where we get messed up. So we have to decide, as the people of God, are we going to follow the dragon's authority, which is heavenly? Are we going to follow the lamb, which is holy?
Is it always that simple?
The question is it always that simple? I would say the dragon versus the lamb is always that simple. I think the blasphemy comes in when we call the dragon the lamb and the lamb the dragon. That's the blasphemy. So, in what that means for today, go ahead.
Kind of doing the wrong thing for the right reasons.
Yes.
Is, I think, what we often get caught in.
Well, and I mean, I really think. I mean, you said talking about taking the Bible literally. There was a movement, been years back now. It's called the Red Letter Christians, right? Which is an evangelical movement, but evangelical in the sense of Jesus, not politics. And that movement is still somewhat pretty active. If we just read and did and lived according to the way Jesus called us to live, it would be that simple. It would be that simple to say, that's the dragon, that's the lamb. But what we do is we say, well, that evil's not that bad. I mean, it's going to serve a purpose later on. Well, but look how much devastation and destruction is going to happen between following the dragon and following the lamb.
Just look at what happened to the church. And the Christendom, when it started out, there were these devout, holy people, popes, and so forth. And then by the time they get on up, the number of people that they killed in the name of God.
Mm-hmm.
So the old thing about power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it happened to these papal people, papal leaders.
Yeah. Well, so it goes back to the accusation of what we do to each other. We say our following the Lamb is better than your following the Lamb. When it turns out both of us are following the dragon. Right? So not only so we can say as good Reformed people, look what the Catholic Church did, but you know what the Reformed Church did? During the Reformation, we literally drowned one another over whether or not to baptize as infants or adults. There are stories of two boats passing, and there's a believer baptism boat, literally, and an infant baptism boat passing each other, and they're pulling each other into the river to kill them so that they can say, no, the way we follow the Lamb is the best way to follow the Lamb. That's the challenge, and that's the blasphemy, where we want power even as the church.
We always get in trouble when we have me.
Best way is that it's the only.
Yes.
When we have me in it, it's always worked that wrong. When you say me, what I want.
Right. And again, that's one of the reasons I really love the Presbyterian Church is while you can read Scripture by yourself, and you should, we discern the will of God together. That is really, really important. Read Scripture all day long, but discern together. Right? Even when I'm reading Scripture and preparing for a sermon, I'm not coming in going, hoo-hoo, I'm going to tell them something today. Like, it has to speak to me first. And then I think about, and I was telling Dr. Bailey this the other day. When I get stuck in a sermon, I go into, and y'all know I don't write a manuscript. I'm not off the cuff, but extemporaneous preacher. And so when I get stuck, even in my preparation for my sermon, I go in the pulpit and I look at where all you people sit, you Presbyterians in your pews. And I think about what you need to hear. And sometimes that may be a word of comfort. And sometimes that may be a word of encouragement. And sometimes it may be a word of, come on, let's get going. Right? And so I'm discerning with you whether you're in that process or not, if that makes sense. If I come in on Sunday and be like, you need to hear this, then we got a problem. Right? I mean, that's a big problem, because then I become the dragon and not the one who gets to defeat the dragon. So I think that, so the question then is, how do we stop confusing the lamb with the dragon? I think that's the $1 million question, right?
Does the dragon show humility? And Christ the lamb.
Yeah.
I would say by realizing that they can be confused.
Instead of a wolf in sheep's clothing, it's a dragon in sheep's clothing.
So I have a question.
Okay.
I've never seen 616.
Yeah, it's one of the it's an early manuscript. So there are in New Testament scholarship, there are a bunch of different codexes, and each codex is a manuscript, and they have different names, like there's Sinaiticus Codex or something like that. So basically, it's essentially there's an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, an F. There are like 150 codexes. And we don't have the complete codex. We have fragments, right? And so what a text-critical person would do, they would go and they would look at, so maybe Codex A says 666, B says 666, D says 616, E says 616, and F says 616. So they're going to like, well, why? So where we're going to look. So these two codexes, they may come from way over here in Egypt, where this codex, C, E, and F, may come from closer to Patmos itself. Right? So they have to decide which codex is more accurate. And the reason these codex is because what happens is, I'll get to your question in just a minute. What happens is A is going to go to B and read their codex, and B is going to go to C, and C is going to go to D. And so somebody's reading it out loud. So if I just read all of Revelation and you copied it as fast as you could do, and then you went out and sent Revelation into your communities, that's how you get those different codexes. So 616 is in some of those codexes.
Saying that it's different spellings of Nero's name.
It is different spellings based on the codex. Yep.
This is talking about how 6 is 1 less than the perfect 7.
Yes. So that's the other piece is it is Nero, but you could also say it's just imperfection. It's imperfection 3 times. So codex, like text critical analysis, is really fun. I actually, when you have to take Greek, and then you have to take New Testament exegesis. And my New Testament exegesis professor was a text critical scholar. And so he taught me, which I've totally forgotten how to do, how to read the codices at the bottom. So in the Greek New Testament, at the bottom footnotes are all these codices. And so it has A, and I'm like, oh, that's the Sinaiticus, or that's this, that, and the other. And then you have to argue, for him, you had to argue for your translation based on the codices, not based on the Greek alone. I mean, it was wild. I mean, yeah, but it's not. That's why we've been able to argue about the Bible for 2,000 years, is because it's not simple.
I've got the Parigma study on Revelation, and it says that Caesar Nero is the only titled person who satisfies both 666 and 616. And the different numbers that would have been assigned to the letters of
Right.
his name.
Right.
So it was like, this was confirming that
But
it really is Nero.
what I read was it depends on whether they read it in the Hebrew or in the Greek.
Different case ending.
Yeah. So anyways, questions, comments? We went over a little bit today. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that, because that is why everything's so screwy.
One of the reasons I think we have such a problem in telling the difference is the idea that the dragon can mimic the land.
That's exactly right.
In other words, it is going to be heaven on earth is what the Antichrist is going to say.
Yep. Well, or the Antichrist, or the dragon says, this is what Christianity looks like, and that Christianity is not humble, but it's power. And that's not who Christ was. All right, grace and peace to you. Thank you all very much. I will see you next week as we dive into at least 14, if not more.